Hello, my name is Adam, and I'm on a quest to be the world's most prolific reviewer. And today I'm going to review a movie from 1927 called Wings, and it stars Clara Bow, Charles Rogers, and Richard Arlen. And Wings is a very interesting movie because it's from 1927, as I said, and it's the first movie that won an Oscar. And technically, it's a silent film because the dialogue is not spoken, but it was released with a synchronized soundtrack, which included the music and the sound effects. So that's pretty unique, and it's always going to be historical because it's the first film that won the Best Picture Oscar. And I think when you watch it, like in the beginning, I was like, oh, this is kind of boring because silent films are not for me. Um, because it's about 2.5 hours, which is really long for any movie. The pacing of movies needs to be really good if it's that long, and the pacing is not that good because you have like a big chunk of the movie which is about the love story that begins in the beginning, and then it's about these two guys who are in love with the same woman and they become pilots in the First World War. But when you actually get to the dog fights and the scenes of them flying, it's crazy because these are actually real planes from that time that would be fighting. So the First World War had only ended like 9 years previously to this film coming out and this film being produced. So the people who worked on the film had experience in that war. And there's a scene where like there's this battle at the end of the movie where the pilots are like contributing by flying and they're like bombing the machine gun positions. And it's really, really realistic, I'd say, about how the end of the war looked like. There are tanks, there are like the charges are kind of suicidal, but not that suicidal because the German lines were collapsing at that point. And the Germans, they surrendered before the it's kind of a controversial thing, but the Germans surrendered in the First World War when they knew that everything was going to collapse. In the Second World War, but they surrendered before the actual collapse. In the Second World War, they 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 didn't surrender during the collapse, and things were collapsing and Hitler was completely out of control. And probably it was good. I mean, it wasn't good. Like, war is never good. But, like, the Germans clearly had an idea that they lost the Second World War. And because they didn't feel the entire collapse of the army in 1918, the Germans didn't really understand that they had, in fact, lost the war, which led to the Second World War. But anyway, you have like these attacks on fortified positions, and you have like a lot of death represented. It's represented sort of theatrically, you know, the big death scene. There's a famous, I think, scene where a guy gets, maybe it's not so famous, but the guy gets shot and he's like, you know, he holds his chest and he falls down dramatically, which I think in real war, the terrifying thing is like somebody just gets, like I watched a documentary about the Ukraine war called 200, I think it's 200 meters or 1,000 meters to Andrivka. And there's a scene where, like, you talk to a soldier and the soldier gets interviewed, and then he just stops talking because he's been shot. You know, there's no dramatic thing about it. It's just that's the way that actually warfare works. So I think it's weird because the special it's not really special effects because they are really flying the planes. So that's quite interesting to watch. And it's quite interesting to watch people's perspectives, like veterans' perspectives of that war, like what they actually thought about it. Because in 1927, weirdly, the war wasn't, at least in America, it wasn't considered to be this bad mistake, right? And now I think we historically everywhere tend to view that war as kind of a mistake. It was tragic, it led to a lot of really bad things. And but this movie is not like pro-war, but it's not anti-war also. It's just portrayed as something that these characters had to do. And I think maybe it comes from the American perspective in the war because they were only in the war 1 year. And it took most of that year to actually get the troops on the line. And not to say that Americans didn't suffer, they did suffer, but it's quite different than if you were like a French soldier. If you survived from 1914 to 1918, it would have been a miracle for you, right? So, yeah, the movie itself, going back to the movie, it's not that interesting because it's a silent film and the pacing is really really bad. But if you wanted to watch the scenes of aerial combat, it it works. It works. It really works. So I would recommend that. I'd give it like maybe 6 out of 10 because it's interesting from historical perspective and clearly they worked hard on it and it's the movie that kind of set the bar for what aerial combat should look like in films. And it's, I guess, very realistic depiction of aerial combat. And a bit of the production notes, like one guy, they had like 300 pilots who were working on this movie. One guy broke his neck. I'm not sure if he actually died or not, but he did break his neck or if he was paralyzed or whatever. So pretty really dangerous situation. And it's funny because one of the actors, I forget which one, he actually had pilot experience, so that's why they chose him. So the scenes of him in the cockpit are actually him flying the plane, and the other actor didn't have any experience, but he spent like a month training how to fly, so he also was in the cockpit, which is like really really dangerous. Like you can tell that the safety standards have changed in movie making over the time because like the two main leads of your movie are flying these dangerous contraptions, and one only has a month of experience doing it. Yeah. Another maybe thing about the movie, Clara Bow, who was a huge star. This is a Paramount movie, and she was the biggest star of Paramount at the time in 1927. So that's why she's in the movie. And she did interviews later, and they asked her about it, and she said, basically, I'm just the icing on the cake. It's not really a movie about me. It's a man's movie, and I'm just there as icing on the cake, which is an interesting perspective because the the movie the actual love plot of the movie is really disconnected to the actual action, and maybe that's why the movie doesn't really work for me. The action is completely irrelevant to the main plot. There's these two guys, they're in love with the same person, but not really. And then one guy dies because of war, tragic. But it's not really, the war is just something that happens. And maybe that's actually a good kind of depiction of war because war is something that happens. But there's not, I felt really bored and there's not connection between those two things, I think. Yeah, I think that's all that I want to talk about the movie. But yeah, What do you think? Put your thoughts in the comment section down below. Let me know what you think about it. If you want to subscribe to my channel, that would really help me. I'm trying to get to 1,000 subscribers by the end of March. I think I have 702 right now. And yeah, if you are listening to this on Spotify, please give me a follow. All right, thanks. Bye-bye.